Hey everyone, good evening. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, happy whatever else you may be celebrating day. Sorry about the delay there. Had to make sure that we had some technical difficulties taken care of, but they're all set. And we are ready to roll. So welcome to Rick's Room. I'm your host, Mr. Rick. Thanks for stopping by the room again on this Wednesday evening. We've had this up and down weather here in the Midwest. I hear it's like nice and warm on the West Coast and down in the South. Well, it always is. And then they got some cold weather out west. So, you know me, I blame the government. But, you know, we're here live every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. If this is your first time hanging out in the room, I want to say welcome to you. We appreciate you stopping by. This is a place where we kick it, have, you know, some great adult conversations. We confront stereotypes and whatever else may come up. So if this is your first time, welcome to you. And remember, just be respectful. You can comment on the conversation there below on Facebook or give us a call at 708-223-8953. And if you're back again for another visit, thanks again for coming back by. You know the deal. Go ahead and grab your adult beverage. We got ours. Find a comfortable place on a chair, on a couch, with love seat, on the floor, wherever you want to. Just as always, stay off my bed. All right. So now that we got the rules and regulations covered, you can always catch us here on IntellectualRadio.com and iHeartRadio and iTunes station, YouTube, and streaming live on Facebook. Say, hey, Facebook, what's going on? Good to see you. And if you have an idea for a topic or discussion here in Rick's Room or want to be a guest or looking to sponsor a show, go ahead and shoot me an email at ricksroom2@gmail.com. That's RIXROOM2@gmail.com. Tonight, we're continuing on our discussion with Dear Black People because, you know, it's February, so we got to have conversations around Black History Month and what's beneficial for our people. And you don't have to be Black to participate in this conversation. You can be any ethnicity. We encourage you to share your comments, experiences, concerns, or whatever else you want to share, again, respectfully. But we are addressing conversations, topics, and issues that concern the Black community. And tonight, we're talking about roles and responsibility in the judicial system. I have a good friend who is returning back to the room with us. Miss Natasha L. Robinson, Esquire, is in the building. What's going on, Miss Natasha? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm battling just a little cold, so I apologize if you see me turn around and cough.
It's all right. It's all right. You know, you got to get that out. But I'll tell you what works. This red wine might help. So cheers to Wednesday. Make sure you got your adult beverage too as well. As we go ahead and get this show started real quick, I want to let you know the show is being brought to you by DLP Serenity Travel. Again, it's if you're looking for a getaway and can't find the time to plan a vacation, make sure you check out DLP Serenity Travel and get your vacation planned and taken care of. Planning trips both domestic and international, and even some cruises, which I'm thinking to reach out. I told y'all last week I was trying to reach out to DLP for my partner's travel down in New Orleans, but I think we're going to do a cruise or something for his birthday, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, DLP Serenity Travel can get you ready for your next getaway. Contact DLP Serenity Travel by visiting their website, www.dlpserenitytravel.com, or give them a call directly. 773-678-4161 to schedule a consultation. That's DLP Serenity Travel, where it's all about you. Also, we got tonight the Cookout on Wheels. You've heard about them before. The Cookout on Wheels can cater your next big event. Serving backyard barbecue options, including their award-winning prime rib sandwich. Customize your menu and make your event a huge success. You can find and message the Cookout on Wheels on Facebook or give them a call directly at 630-708-7820. And you can even email Natasha directly at cookiecrumbs10 at gmail.com. That's cookie, COOKIE. CRUMBS, the number 10 at gmail.com. That's the Cookout on Wheels. # friends fed here. So, you know, I had a conversation, Tasha, with some friends recently here. And have you seen Black Panther yet?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if y'all have seen Black Panther. We're not going to give any spoilers away, but right. Wakanda forever.
Forever.
Got the shoulders going. Ready. I'm ready. But it's really kind of sparked a lot of debates around, you know, our community. And, you know, we got some sisters and brothers out there who are just deep, right? Just so deep. Like they got to dig and swim in deep waters about everything, including this movie. It can't just be a movie that we enjoy, right? It has to be deep. And there's some things that we have to do to better our community, and we should be supporting our community and this and that. Well, I figured, why not talk about some of those supportive ways that we can have in the judicial system? And I know that you have some passionate points that we wanted to cover today. So the first thing we're going to dive right into, guys, is one of Tasha's real hot button. One of her biggest hot buttons.
Yeah.
Y'all know what happens when you get that letter in the mail that says you have been summoned for jury. Now, dear black people, we're talking to y'all, okay? You get that piece of mail, and the instant you get it and you see it, the first thing you probably are ready to do, throw it out. I got to find a way to get out of it. I cannot be bothered with jury duty. Oh my God. And we make it a big deal. And realistically, when we talk about what we can do as a people, some of the options that we have or areas that we have to impact and make impacts, here it is. Jury duty is one of them. Jury duty is one of the biggest ways you can do your part in participating in the judiciary system for people of color in general. We talk about people of color who are, that make up such a huge population of incarceration, and it potentially could be because the jury selection could have been a little bit better or a little bit more suited for their peers. So let's talk about this. Tasha, let me ask you, how often do you find, when you have back in your heyday, when you were out there, how often did you find, people of color were part of the jury makeup? Like, what did that look like?
Okay, so just by way of background, let me give some.
Go ahead. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Just so we can put it into context. I work with the Public Defender's Office from 2000 until 2012. So that's 12 years of representing those who cannot afford to obtain legal representation.
Sure.
And we were appointed, when I say we, I mean the attorneys, we were appointed to their case. I started off with misdemeanors that range from anywhere to a traffic ticket up to 364 days in jail. And then over time, I became appointed to those cases felonies, where you were looking at anywhere from 365 days or more in prison up to natural life. And so those were the type of cases that I did: kidnapping, sexual assault, first-degree murder, you name it. When I was a public defender, I was stationed most of that career was at Markham, which is the 6th district. It's off of 165th and Kedzie. And while I was there, the majority of my clients looked like me, but the majority of jurors did not.
Really?
Yes. And so what was very frustrating for my clients is that they say, Ms. Robinson, we're guaranteed to right to a trial by jury. And we have this expectation to be tried by a jury of our peers. Peers, not necessarily meaning we grew up the same way or we lived in the same neighborhood, but we're from the same community. When you work in Cook County, peers could be on any end of the spectrum. Race, religion, gender, political beliefs, anything.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something for my clients. They observed that it was always more difficult for them to sit in front of people who did not look like them. And so from my client's perspective, they felt that the majority of people that looked like them were in the lockup, as opposed to those who were legal professionals, those who were in the clerk's office, or even the judge or the sheriffs. So in sitting behind the counsel's desk, as I'm sitting right now, and looking across the room to potential jurors, we are very lacking as it relates to the racial component for a number of reasons. One of the first reasons is that when you are called to jury duty, I have had a number of people say to me, and I'm not going to implicate the guilty, but I have had a number of people say to me, how can I get out of it? Ooh. Oh man, how can I not go?
Listen, and you know what? I've been there. I'm gonna put myself on blast, y'all. Y'all don't have to do it. You probably are commenting. I'm gonna check in and see if we can check out the comments. But maybe y'all don't do this, but I know I have done it in the past, right? Where there's been some, the mail comes and I'm like, I gotta find a way to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that do when you hear that?
So it does two things. The first thing is I've served both as a criminal defense attorney that has questioned potential jurors, and I have also been a juror. So I understand the inconvenience that comes with sitting in the room and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for someone to call your name. I also understand the difficulty that comes with having to reschedule your work schedule or whatever schedule you already have prior to the jury duty. I also understand that some people just do not want to have what they perceive to be that type of power to decide someone's legal consequence. My dad says all the time, only God can judge. And he's quick to get out of jury. Of course, when he says his name and they say, what do you do? And he says, I'm a retired pastor. And they be like, oh, thank you very much. So it's hugely inconvenienced in terms of time. But what you're trading it in for is the convenience of the right to be heard, the right to represent your views and your positions, and to enjoy a constitutional protection that had been denied for so long as it relates to African Americans sitting on juries. I tell my students all the time, I teach high school students at Al-Raby High School. And in our law program, I tell my students time and time again what Judge Eugene Pensham told me. He used to be one of the appellate court judges for the state of Illinois. And prior to his death, one of the things he constantly said to myself as well as to so many other people is, you can't be what you ain't seen. And so I don't want my students, or anyone for that matter, to have their first interaction with anyone in the legal profession because of a negative consequence. Mm-hmm. And I also don't want them to have their first interaction with the criminal justice system either by way of being a witness to a crime, a victim of a crime, or a defendant of a crime.
Right.
So when I hear people say, how can I get out of jury duty? It irritates me only because I am the attorney that is sitting there and going through the very long and arduous process of trying to select, jurors who I believe are fair, period.
Right.
But when you have people, and I will give a couple of examples, real life, I am not making this up.
Look, that's why we got Tasha here. So yes. We can go through some real life examples for y'all.
Real life examples.
To check this out. And if you have some questions, call in 708-223-8953. Let's get into some examples.
So one example is, I remember a case where I was sitting at the defense table and my client was sitting next to me, and we were engaging what's called voir dire. Voir dire is the questioning of potential jurors in order to see if they would be fair and if they would be non-biased when it comes to deciding the verdict of guilty or not guilty based on the evidence. One African-American lady, when I was questioning her, just asking her, a few things about who she was and if she was presented with a certain set of facts or evidence, could she be fair? And she told me, I can't be on no juror. And it was just like this. I can't be on no juror.
And for those of you that are listening, that was the neck roll and everything, back and forth.
It's back and forth. I can't be on no juror. Okay, ma'am, can you, are you sick? Are you ill? Is there some type of time commitment that precludes you from serving? And she said, no, I just don't trust Black men. And I said, so, the judge and my colleagues and the state are waiting for me to sit down. Oh, no. Now I have to ask, why do you not like Black men? Because one, you can't unring a bell. Two, while I was irritated by her comment, I appreciated the fact that she said it. Because if there are other people who also feel that way, now is the time for me to hear you. Because I can't hear you again when the trial starts. At that point, I can't say, and then
right.
start talking to them.
Right.
It is talking to and trying to persuade with the evidence a bunch of strangers. They don't know me. I don't know them, but I am the mouthpiece for my client. And so I am the only person physically standing in between my client going in lockup and my client going home. So when I asked her, what does she mean by she didn't like Black men? She's like, well, they're just shifty and they're just, can't be trusted. And I said, ma'am, it says on your juror card that you are married to a Black man and you are a mother of Black sons who are also Black men. And she said, well, that's different.
Oh,
so
wait, time out. All that information's on a jury card? You fill all of that out?
Yes, because as she's talking, I'm making notes.
Right.
As I'm making notes, there are questions that are not on the jury card, but come from conversation where the judge or the prosecution or either defense, the judge usually starts off first, sometimes saying, tell us about yourself. And they go through all of the questions on the cards. And then out of those questions come certain answers. And so it was through her answers that I'm listening and steadily, being stream of conscious, because I need to make sure through my consciousness that my client also feels that he or she is a part. Because if they're just watching their future, unfold and they have no say so, then that relationship is being broken.
Sure.
So I'm writing notes down, I'm sharing it with him, How do you feel about this person? And then that way they kind of weigh in. And you only, as an attorney on prosecution and defense, you only have so many opportunities to strike a person. And when I say strike, I don't mean physically hit. What I mean is,
because I'm sure there were some times that you might have wanted to.
No comment. All I'm saying is that there are some under the law, and each state is different. But for the state of Illinois, you have two types of opportunities to remove a juror, potential juror who you feel would not be fair. The first is for cause. For cause means that you would have to state on the record why you feel that particular juror would not be fair. And you have to state that. And you only get so many. Well, actually, let me take that back. You have an unlimited amount of those, but you have to say something.
Okay.
The second type of removal process is called preemptory strikes. There are a limited number for that. There's 5 if you are doing a misdemeanor jury trial, and there's 7, I believe, if you're doing a felony. And so for preemptory challenges, you do not have to give an explanation. You just say, with gratitude, defense excludes or excuses juror number 1 or juror number 10 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So it's for cause, you have an unlimited amount, but you have to give an explanation and the judge has to grant it. Or preemptory challenges, which there is an unlimited, there is a limited amount, mm-hmm. but you do not have to give an explanation.
So that sounds like, not to cut you off, but that mm-hmm. sounds like to me then that individuals, that attorneys have, an opportunity 5 times to get rid of a juror for no reason.
Yes. Now we're talking about collections of at least 25 people. So you have to, when they're impaneled, at least in Cook County, there are so many that come up into the jury box at one time. You have to go through all of them and then say, okay, it's very strategic. It's almost, I hate to liken it to this, but it's almost like a draft in the sense that, and you have to be very strategic. While you can only go on what it is that you see, you have to figure out, based on what you hear, can this person be fair? I never say that jurors are unbiased, because that would be a lie. We all bring, all of us, defendants, defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges, everyone, jurors, we all bring a certain set of biases, and that's just human nature. So the point becomes, what bias can I use that can benefit my client to the best of his or her ability?
Sure.
Meaning, what type of biases will allow a person to say, you know what, just because someone says it happened doesn't necessarily mean it did happen. Okay, you're trying to make sure that you are creating a jury that is fair, that is impartial, but is also still human. Because if they're coming in and they think that everything happens in a particular box instead of in real life, then that's the type of things that you have to navigate around. At least for me, I can't speak for other attorneys, prosecutors, or defense. But for me, it was picking jurors who were human, picking jurors who were fair, who were impartial, and then me being transparent in my representation of my client, because it's not a popularity contest. There have been tons of juries that I have witnessed or have been a part of where the jurors have spoke to me afterwards and said, we couldn't stand your client, couldn't stand them. However, the evidence did not bear out their guilt. That's the jury you want.
And I think that when you're, and that's a hard job to navigate through that. I'm sure, mm-hmm. like there's a lot that you have to pay attention to. I guess that's why lawyers are in school for so long, almost as long as doctors. And speaking of doctors, my sister Doc Locke, Doc Locke, your soror actually, just said, what did I say last week about going to jury duty? She was very adamant about the people of color, especially Black people, having the opportunity to be present and accounted for, to have their say so in impacting the system for other individual people of color who are on trial, who are these defendants. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like there's a strategic process that you as an attorney have to go through to ensure that you are getting fair jurors across the panel, but you're also battling against the prosecution, correct?
Well, yes. Well, it's a battle in the sense of the prosecution has a sworn duty, and their sworn duty is to seek justice and to also advocate that justice by way of representing the victim. Okay, the person who is saying something happened to me or something didn't happen to me. I lost I had a financial loss, something like that, whatever that alleged victim is. And so the defense, a lot of people think that if you are a defense attorney, you are endorsing the alleged actions of your client. And that is not the case. The case is that their constitution says that you have to prove someone guilty beyond, a reasonable doubt.
Whose constitution?
Their constitution. It's my constitution too.
It is all
and,
of ours.
And it doesn't
right.
say it literally per se, but the laws and the cases that have come out of it is that the way that our criminal justice system is set up, you have to prove someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, in the law that is given to the jurors, they call jury instructions. There is no definition of what beyond a reasonable doubt means. However, in the jury instructions, there are different, so whatever the crime is, say if you're charged with attempted murder, one of the instructions that you and the jury would be reviewing is, what does the law have to say? Meaning, what does the prosecution have to prove? They have to prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt. If you just have the slightest bit of doubt, then legally that rises to the level of an acquittal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference between actual guilt and legal guilt. So you can be watching something on television and someone can say, oh, I saw a picture of one person, they were beating up another person. Here's the video, here's the statement, here's the fingerprints. That may be actual guilt, but that does not necessarily rise to the level of legal guilt. Legal guilt means you can't just say, here's all the evidence I have. There are rules of evidence that attorneys know that they have to make sure that if that thing is to stand for what it really is, you have to go through those rules of evidence. It could be relevance. It could be hearsay. It could be foundation, meaning, is this video what it really is? Has anyone intercepted this video on the way to the evidence vault? And so what happens is just because something is admissible in court doesn't necessarily mean that it's valued or it has credibility. So these are all of the things that prosecution and defense are wrestling with. Prosecutors, excuse me, when we have jury selection, I'm talking about my experience now.
Sure.
The prosecutors come into court, they have the case file, which has the police reports and things of that nature. And then there is a stack of papers. Those stack of papers are the backgrounds of the potential jurors. So if potential jurors may have a criminal background and they deny it, then that could lead a person to believe, well, if you're not truthful about your own background, how can you be truthful regarding someone's case?
And the defense doesn't get that same stack of papers?
Yes, we do get it. But what happens is that because I would say the prosecution has easier access. Not that we're barred from it.
Sure.
But they can just, it's done so quickly that it's just easy access. No prosecutor has ever denied me and said, Natasha, you can't see that. Because that's just not the nature of our relationship or the legality of what was happening in court. So you would look at that information, and I'm not speaking now as an employee of or former employee of public defender's office. I'm speaking as Natasha. When I would go into court, I would pray. Because
we know we couldn't do that as a Cook County employee.
Yeah, I would pray that the people with whom I came in contact would be forthright in stating if they have ever been arrested before. I don't care what the age is. And I know people are like, well, wait a minute. If you're a juvenile, then those records are supposed to be sealed. Not all the time. I would pray that people would just be forthright and say, this is what I did, or this is what I've been accused of. Now, the other side of that is you are revealing who you are to a room of strangers. And a lot of times people who are potential jurors may feel like, wait a minute, I feel like I'm on trial. So you're not going to do me, boo. I'm going to sit over here. I'm going to be quiet. Or I'm not even going to get into it in the first place, like the elderly lady, which was, you're not even going to put me in that situation and put me on trial. Because sometimes it can get a little intense when you're trying to ask the jurors, about their beliefs, about their experiences. And so some people will feel like, I don't really feel cool sharing that information. I have had some jurors in sexual assault cases talk about when they were assaulted. And so then how do you handle that so that It is not a situation where they feel victimized again.
And I was going to say, when you talk about, and maybe this might be something that keeps people of color, specifically African Americans, away from being a part of the jury selection, or just getting involved with, jury duty in general. They fear that because their criminal background comes to light, that it potentially could exclude them from being a part of the cycle in general, being a part of the panel, the jury.
Right, but if you lie about it,
right, that's what's going to keep. Right, exactly. That's what excludes you.
Right, and so the prosecutors, they have the right, just like defense, to decide who do they feel would be fair and impartial. And so you can't find a perfect juror. It does not exist.
Sure.
You're working with, people with their frailties, people as it relates to them bringing their own baggage, if you will, their own experience. So you have that group of people who may have criminal background. Then you have another group of people who, on paper, may seem absolutely great. When they are asked questions, they sound great. And then for some reason, they get stricken. Okay. If it is based solely on race, the Supreme Court has said that is illegal and is unconstitutional.
Of course it is.
And so,
but it happens.
Yes, you would say,
right.
It still happens.
Wow.
It still happens because of the fact there is one factor that allows for striking where you can't quite prove it's race. You just kind of feel it.
Is that the one that you have the limitation of 5 that you don't have to give a reason for?
Yes,
right.
Preemptory challenges.
Yes, yeah.
According to Batson versus Kentucky, which is a 1986 case, the court held that you cannot use those types of challenges to just strike Black jurors. And so when they were doing the research, they were realizing that in this case, prosecutors were just striking Blacks, period. And it was very strategic. And if you were not keeping record, it would just be like, okay, well, where all of the Black people go?
Right.
And so when they started doing
vanished.
Right, when they started doing studies, they started seeing that there was a pattern. And one major trend that came out was that all white juries at one point were more likely to find a Black defendant guilty.
No, of course.
Okay. And so when you're talking about leveling the playing field and making sure that African Americans are not stricken solely because of their race, it still ties into Jim Crow. It still ties into how you have structures of oppression that try to take the right to vote from people. And they do it with a poll tax. They do it with a grandfather clause where if your grandfather could vote, then you could vote. Well, if my grandfather was enslaved, then of course he couldn't vote. So that means now I can't vote. Or illiteracy, where if you did not read certain words well, if you were not able to comprehend them or explain them, then you were stricken. Or like my own grandmother, who was a resident of Meridian, when she went to vote, their test was guess how many marbles are in a jar. And if you could guess how many marbles are in a jar, then that will allow you to vote.
Wait, that was a thing?
Yes. Yes, it was.
Wow.
Yeah, especially in the South. I'm not excluding the North,
sure,
but definitely the South.
Sure.
So as you start having these constitutional protections, the 13th Amendment, which is freeing enslaved African Americans, when you have the 14th Amendment that makes them legally citizens, when you have the 15th Amendment that gives them the right to vote, all of these protections are put in place in theory. But in practice, you still have the states who are still deciding what and what not to do because they feel they have the discretion.
Wow.
And so they're in positions of power. So when you have jurors that are selected, if some counties, you have to be a registered voter. If you're not a registered voter, you can't be a juror. There are some that say you have to be a particular age. There's some that say you have to have a driver's license. But if I'm African American and my driver's license is suspended for whatever reason, I can't serve. So it's about trying to make sure that, one, you still are picking fair and impartial jurors from both sides, prosecution and defense. But secondly, you are making sure that at no way or time is there inappropriateness in saying just because this person is Black, automatically they must have some type of kinship. So let me strike them. I am by no means or reason saying that just because you are Black, all of a sudden you have an acquittal. That's not how the system works.
Right.
But it is still about allowing juries to show their civic duty by showing up. And you cannot say all whites can do this, but blacks are incapable of doing that. It's illegal, it's unconstitutional, and quite frankly, it's immoral, and it needs to stop.
Wow. Well, so that's a lot of information there too, and that sounds like it's a game of numbers. So the more black people that actually show up for jury duty, the more of a selection that you potentially can have to choose from for
Ideally.
people of color. Ideally,
Yes,
right?
ideally,
Exactly.
yes.
Charles Talbert, which is actually my frat brother,
Hi.
says, if everyone has a bias, can the jury ever be impartial? And in some cases where jurors aren't even aware of their own biases until called into play, is justice ever realistic? I've served on 2 juries, had negative experiences both times, and have tried to avoid the process ever since.
Mm-hmm. So I would say to Charles, I don't know where you served on a jury, but you are correct in the sense that it seems to be almost a paradox for it to be impartial and to have biases. The way that the law reads for jurors is that you are to not make any type of decision until you get the evidence. When you get the evidence, you get the evidence. So it could be physical, it could be what you heard in court, and it can also be tactile, meaning you could touch it, physical evidence. You also get the law, and the law says in the state of Illinois, for example, Cook County, the state must prove the following, and it will say this, and this. And then ideally, a juror will look at the law, talk about it with the other jurors, and then see, according to the evidence that they heard, which is testimonial, as well as physical evidence, where are the alignments? What has been proven? What has been a little bit shaky? That's the impartial part, because you're supposed to not make a judgment until it is your time to decide. And even then, when you decide, it is not about what you feel they had on a cute outfit, or you could trust them immediately when they open their mouth. That is bringing biases that don't help. Now, when you have jury deliberation, you can't help but have biases. And so because in at least the state of Illinois, the jury has to be unanimous. Everybody has to agree either guilty or not guilty. If there's all guilty and then one that is saying not guilty or reverse, you have to keep deliberating. It could result in a mistrial. And then you have to do the trial all over again.
What's that, a hung jury, right?
Yes.
I've been watching Law and Order, y'all. Yes, my show.
So yes, it could be a hung jury because no one is budging. In those jury deliberation rooms is when all the biases come out. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, you've been silent this entire time. You may have said, hi, how you doing? Or please pass me that bagel or something like that. But you are not supposed to talk about the case. It is not until the judge says you are now free to deliberate. Then everyone goes in a small back room and they talk about the case. And the more they talk about it, the more biases or experiences come out. That is the game changer at that point. Because if you have some jurors that have never had any type of interaction with police in a negative way, then you can't even fathom someone who is testifying talk about the fact that they picked on them for no other reason than because they were Black. That is an experience that needs to be in that jury deliberation room. If you have never been accused of something that you didn't do, you don't really have an idea of what happens when the person who's sitting next to me is saying, I didn't do it, I can't find my witnesses, and I'm using my right to remain silent, meaning I'm still not going to testify, because if I testify about what I didn't do, what I may have done years later may possibly come into play. So then my credibility of I really am innocent is now chopped down because something stupid I did 5 years ago.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's important to know too.
Yeah. So I completely understand Charles' point and a lot of people's point. Black, white, whatever. The frustration of going into a room and unfortunately, jury's duty is just not pleasant, particularly criminal or civil, because you are deciding whether someone is legally responsible or liable, and for criminal, whether someone is guilty or innocent. But it's still a duty and it's still a service that we need to experience if we're called upon, because then the Batson case is all in vain. All of the cases where Black men were sitting in the defendant's seat, but not in the witness stand because they weren't able to testify or because they weren't in the jury, all of that is for naught. So we might as well just Hand the convictions over.
Well, I think that's wow, that's a lot, and I'm a fan of our judicial. Excuse me, I'm a fan of the spirit behind those biases are there for a reason, and the reason we have a jury is because of those biases coming into play, so that you have a selection of your peers who can either relate or not, and the deliberation actually take place to determine based on the information that you have as a juror if this person is guilty. I think that the spirit of the theory of is there and it makes sense to me. But when you have the people that are on the jury that don't look like me, who can't share in some of the same biases, then that's where we have the hang up. And before I move on, I want to make sure that I take a moment. A Shakur Boutique is sponsoring tonight's show as well. Oh, let me do this, since we're talking about the way that we can support as a community of people of color, of Black people specifically. West Point Baptist Church will be hosting their third annual Black Business Expo, the third annual vendor expo celebrating Black businesses this Sunday after service. It'll be starting directly after service, so make sure you stop by 10 o'clock service to have worship, and then come on and support the Black businesses, at least in the Chicagoland area, if you are here. And it's going to be a great ordeal. We have some of the sponsors for Rick's Room that'll be there. For example, A Shakur Boutique, they will be there. She'll be there as well. She's also still offering 20% off of anyone joining the mailing list. So make sure you take a moment to check that out. And Mind Over Matter will also be there as well, who supports Rick's Room. So come on out, 3566 Cottage Grove, this Sunday after 10 o'clock service for their Black Business Expo. Tasha, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is a misconception that when you get a private defender, a public defender, that they're in cahoots with, they're a coercion with Cook County, like they're trying to still score a win for Cook County. How do you negate that? How do you do away with that type of a mentality or fear?
So when I started out as a public defender, I had to deal with some of my own biases. One of which was as it relates to those who were indigent or poor. My bias was, why aren't you listening to me? I'm the lawyer.
I know
the law. I've paid for it. I'm still paying for it. I've studied for it. So why wouldn't you trust me? When you start a relationship, a professional relationship with a client, you are meeting them and everything that they have gone through that they may or may not tell you. So when you have some clients that are saying, I saw you say good morning to the state's attorney, y'all must be, doing whatever. At that point, you have to just kind of reassure them that this is not a popularity contest. I can be civil and still be lethal. And
which I believe you are.
Yeah,
a little bit.
We
won't put your bad knowledge out there, but
lethal only in the sense of once you put me in that job of upholding the Constitution and being the advocate for my client, yes, I am a very tough, legal, ethical, because you're dealing with a lot of people, particularly for those who need public defender services, who already feel disenfranchised.
Mm-hmm.
They do not trust the system. They do not trust me because I am a part of the system, even though I am speaking for them. And unfortunately, you have one of those things where a lot of people are put into one group based on, several experiences. So I will be told, well, the public defenders, all they trying to do is plea it down, so they can go to the next case. And it was no denying of that because that may have been their experience. I would just tell them over time, I can show you better than I can tell you.
Mm.
And as we began to develop that relationship, a lot of times I found out that the thing in which they confided in me about the first time wasn't all of the story. It was over time that they were like, you know what? You really do know what you're doing, or you really do care. And so it would be then the floodgates would come open. And I would always tell my client, I'm not a magician. I'm an attorney. So I can't make things disappear, all of the things show up. If you don't tell me now, then my ability to represent you and ability to protect you, even legally, is compromised. So over time, I kind of got a reputation. And so what would happen is that
Really?
yeah, I will walk into a jail cell, and in Markham, the jail cell would probably hold 40 people who are there in custody. And I will walk in, and it is horrible inside. It stinks. It's dirty. It's full of sanitation issues, which leads to a whole thing about how just because you're charged with a crime doesn't mean you need to be convicted of being humane. Okay, you still need to be treated with respect. And so I will walk in, the sheriffs, who are all my buddies, they would take that big key, let me in, and lock me in. So if I wanted to get out, they would have to come back and lock me, unlock the door. And so I would speak to.
What? You went there like that?
Yeah. I mean, I was never scared, never fearful, because my thing is, if I'm scared of you back here, how am I going to advocate for you out there where other people are scared of you?
Great point.
So it was relationship building. And I would come in there and I would say, good morning, gentlemen. Gentlemen, not good morning, criminals, good morning, niggas, nothing like that. It was good morning, gentlemen, because all I would see are people who, for whatever reason, are back here and they're still human. You still need to treat them with respect. And so you would have, some of the people that would say, hey, Miss Lady, hey.
They were trying to holler while you.
Yeah. Hey, Miss Lady, I don't see a ring on your finger, or hey, Miss Lady, what happened, if somebody sets it off? And I would say, don't let this suit fool you. And it would break out in a laugh. And everyone was kind of like, ha, meaning that they still had to go through what they go through, but they knew based in that moment, I was not going to let anything happen to them. I did not necessarily endorse what they were accused of doing, but I did not know the whole story. So as long as I had that human relationship, I had a better relationship as it relates to public defender to client. Now, of course, there are a whole bunch of stories that I have of when that relationship is trying to be created and your client still acts a fool. What do you do in that situation? How do you remain professional? So it was a spectrum. And so I tell people, even the last time I've been to court, I was in court and I was not in there as an attorney. I was there as family support. And I heard this couple in front of me and they were talking about, well, what's going on? Meaning that the conversation, you sit in a criminal courtroom for hours, but when your actual family member's case come up or your case comes up, it's maybe 5 minutes. And it's a lot of term and code switching. It's blah, 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 blah. And the people who are sitting out, either they can't hear or they can't understand. And so I told, the person I was with, I said, hold on a minute. And I slid over and I told, the family, I said, I think what happened in your family's case is blah, 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 blah. They was like, oh my God, how did you know that? And I was like, I'm a lawyer. Don't tell anybody. And then I slid right on back to my seat because I didn't want them to feel like I was invading their space.
Right.
But I did not want them to walk away without them feeling a little bit more empowered because at least they knew the language. They knew what was going on. So they knew how to prepare emotionally or financially, for their family member.
Well, that's, look, I'm sure they're appreciative of, I know I am. And it sounds like from reading the comments on Facebook, you all are really appreciative of the information that you all have gotten today as well. And in fact, it looks like Lola Isabel says, we need a part 2. This is great. Lola Robinson as well as Charles both thank you. Oh,
hi,
Mommy. I don't know if my mother's watching. I don't know. We'll see if she is later. But so, you know, it looks like we might have to get you back on again, too, because we are going to wrap up here in just a bit. But let me ask you real quick, Miss Attorney Robinson, as you've been called a few times here in the comments. Before we wrap up here, we got a few moments. Is there anything else that you want to get out to the people to let them know, you know, how to go about and navigate through the judicial system?
Yes, just a couple things to wrap up. First, my opinions are my opinions based on my experience. Everyone has a different experience. Everyone has a different opinion. So there may be situations where you or someone you know had a different outcome. That does not lessen your outcome or empower mine. It's just sharing of stories and sharing of collective information. The second thing I would say is empower yourself with information. When we talk about the criminal justice system, a lot of times it's never a positive experience. But if you arm yourself with information beforehand, meaning if you know about the state's attorney's office, what their job is, the discretion they have in charging a person. On the defense side, hiring attorneys, getting public defenders, knowing how many days you have before your case has to be prosecuted, knowing what the judge can and cannot do. All these things of information, so many people suffer because they don't have that information in a system that is already designed to create suffering.
Right.
So it's suffering on top of suffering. So I would just say, if any time, Rick has my information. If you have questions, not necessarily like legal referrals, but just general information, I give it all the time. I'm able and I'm happy to help.
Well, I appreciate you being here and sharing this information, Tasha. Thank you so much. She's copied here on the Facebook post too as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're here live every Wednesday on IntellectualRadio.com. If you missed this show, go ahead and catch up on iHeartRadio or iTunes. Next up, Dana being Dana. Dana Michelle is going to be hosting the show. The Breakup Show is the title of her show tonight. So make sure you tune in at IntellectualRadio.com. Thanks again for tuning in with us tonight. We'll see you next week. Now, get out.